Politics has never looked a more lonely job. Tonight, as her top aides quit, the PM seems more isolated than ever. Ferociously loyal and always in step, Fiona Hill and Nick Timothy were forced to resign. Does this save Theresa May? And for just how long?
What's protecting Theresa May right now is not the loyalty, the respect or even the fear of her party. It's the fact that they can't see anyone obvious with whom to replace her, nor can they see an obvious process to find that person that doesn't risk plunging the party and the government into potentially fatal instability.
There were frustrations in the party. It was about whether or not all of us felt included in her project.
Is Europe laughing at us or as confused as we are? Mark Urban speaks to Angela Merkel's right-hand man.
We should not waste time. We should go into the details as soon as possible.
And do we have to define a new direction for Britain now? Who are the left behinds and what are they asking for? We speak to Nigel Farage, Simon Sharma and Kerry-Ann Mendoza. Good evening and welcome to Westminster Newsnight in daylight. Do not be fooled by mellow sunshine. Do not be fooled by the gentle breeze of a summer weekend. Today saw no calm, no respite in the pace of change and power shifting that gives this place its identity. Senior Conservatives began the day calling for the resignation of Theresa May's Joint Chiefs of Staff. By the afternoon, they got what they wanted. Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill were known for their unwavering loyalty. The PM was accused of relying on them too heavily, closing her eyes perhaps to a more collegiate, consensual type of government. Two unelected names, two broadly unrecognisable faces. Yet these chiefs of staff were at the very heart of government. They knew Theresa May inside out, knew how to shield her from the hostile parts of the job she wished to avoid. They were not just moral support, they were, Nick Clegg told us, instrumental to practically every decision she took.
I asked her not to bring these special advisors with her into the meetings that I used to have with her because I just found it all rather disruptive. But I did find that as a result, I could never get a decision out of her in the meetings because she'd have to go back and sort of, I assume, test her ideas and test my suggestions with people around her.
Nick Timothy offered reason for his resignation by letter, nodding to the high number of Conservative votes on Thursday, but accepting his part too in the disaster that was the social care policy, admitting he should have offered a cap as well as a floor for the cost of it. Fiona Hill said less in valediction. She was known to rub many in Number 10 up the wrong way. Her erratic behaviour became the stuff of hushed legend. Insiders will tell you of the time she spat at the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, or the sweary text she wrote to elected ministers. Allegations unproven and denied. The party's former Director of Communications didn't pull her punches this morning. Katie Perrier accused them both of creating a dysfunctional and toxic atmosphere in Downing Street.
Well, we were going to an 8:30 meeting every morning at Theresa May's office, and the atmosphere would be great if the Chiefs of Staff were not there, and terrible if the Chiefs of Staff were there.
This is Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill.
Correct. And so we would be able to speak freely if they weren't around, and if they were around, you don't speak.
But it was senior Tories who demanded their heads. They wouldn't have gone if they hadn't intended Theresa May to stay. They were meant to be the sacrifice, the frontline casualties, protecting their general from further arrows. But whatever the objective, their departure leaves Theresa May more isolated than ever, a bleeding swimmer in shark-infested waters when the boat sails off to call for help. So does this preserve the PM? For a day or two, certainly it gives her breathing space, but Jeremy Corbyn's still waiting in the wings and the questions still abound. Who will govern Britain now and how? Our political editor, Nick Watts here. Talk today, Nick, of a DUP, alliance or coalition? What would that work as?
Well, the Conservative Chief Whip Gavin Williamson has been in Northern Ireland today meeting Arlene Foster, the leader of the DUP, and other DUP leaders. And I am told that they are looking at the full range of possibilities from just an informal undertaking all the way through to a full coalition agreement. And I am told that what the DUP are looking at is securing welfare benefits. So keep the pension triple lock and preserve universal benefits such as the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. What that will allow the DUP is to say, we're not just acting in the interests of Northern Ireland, we are true unionists. We are acting in the interests of the whole of the United Kingdom. And then it would allow the Tories to remove parts of their manifesto that became so toxic with pensioners. I spoke to one senior source, quoting Linton Crosby, the guy who ran the Conservative campaign in the final stages. It would allow the Tories to remove the barnacles from the boat.
So it sounds as if she's preparing to stay, but was it always that way, Nick?
Well, it's a pretty feverish atmosphere at the moment, and there is uncertainty among cabinet ministers about the long-term future of the Prime Minister. And I am told that in this rather febrile atmosphere, serious consideration was given in the early hours of Friday morning as to whether the Prime Minister should resign. I'm told that by the time of her count in Maidenhead, by which time it was clear that she was in trouble, the Prime Minister was completely devastated. There is even talk that a resignation speech was drafted in the early hours of Friday morning. The idea was that the Prime Minister would then make a statement later on in Friday. As I understand it, what happened was that amid the uncertainty over the result, senior Tory figures said that they should look at how to respond to all outcomes of the election, because it is the duty of any Prime Minister to respond to all those various outcomes. And remember, for a brief period you were there was even talk that Jeremy Corbyn might lead the largest party. But it soon became clear that Theresa May would lead the largest party, and at that point it was her duty, as she later said on Friday, to form a government.
Which is why we're now looking towards a reshuffle this evening.
Yes, I mean, we were expecting perhaps a reshuffle, the full reshuffle earlier on today. As I understand it, it is being described as the Elaster Plus reshuffle. This is basically reappointing mainly the existing cabinet. And the phrase they're saying, Elaster Plus reshuffle, until the leadership of the Conservative Party is sorted out. And that means either Theresa May does continue when she has a full deal underway with the DUP, or there's a contest.
Nick, thanks very much. In politics, as President F.D. Roosevelt once remarked, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned. Now, to suggest the country knew it would elect a minority Conservative government backed up potentially by the DUP, well, that may be a stretch. But perhaps the electorate knew what it was doing when it refused to wholly embrace either Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn in their entire vision for Britain and for Brexit. Many accepted beliefs turned out to be plain wrong. We as a country, particularly perhaps the young, are learning we have more of a voice than perhaps we believed. So what does this election suggest about a new direction for Britain now? David Grossman reports.
This is the first full day of minority government Britain. The rising sun, however, provided little warmth to Theresa May nor much illumination of her path forward. What's protecting Theresa May right now is not the loyalty, the respect, or even the fear of her party. It's the fact that they can't see anyone obvious with whom to replace her, nor can they see an obvious process to find that person that doesn't risk plunging the government into potentially fatal instability. In the words of the poet Hilaire Belloc, they are only holding on to nurse for fear of finding something worse. There may be little public activity, but in WhatsApp chat groups and in private, discreet telephone conversations, Conservative MPs are venting their anger about what happened to their party and their majority. Ed Vaizey was close to David Cameron and campaigned to remain in the EU. He believes Theresa May must now change both her approach and her policies if she's to hold the party together.
She will, I think, have to make sure that she takes us all with her, that it becomes a very inclusive government that reaches out to all wings of the party. And I hope as well that she will have read really the tea leaves in terms of, I think, the message that voters sent us. And the message that I got loud and clear is that voters have rejected a hard Brexit. We can't anymore talk about no deal being better than a bad deal.
The view that the nature of Brexit will have to change is supported by the fact that the Conservatives' new partners, the 10 MPs of the DUP, want the UK to stay in the customs union and want a frictionless border in Northern Ireland. So, is this the end of what critics call a hard Brexit?
We've got to remember that Labour lost this election. And, when given the choice as to who should lead the country through the Brexit negotiations, people, by a majority on the popular vote, chose for Theresa May. And they did that in the full knowledge of the plan that she's set out in her Lancaster House speech, which sets out that we want to guarantee the rights of EU citizens as quickly as possible, that we want to be a global nation, determining our own trade policy, that we want to, have our supremacy over our courts. And I think that those, amongst other issues, are what are the clear objectives of Brexit, and that really is what Brexit means to me.
We have, in a sense, been here before. In the 70s, a minority Labour administration, Lord Armstrong was Principal Private Secretary to the then Prime Minister Harold Wilson.
1974 does demonstrate that when you have a government which has not got a firm overall majority, then the great uncertainty that prevails spreads over a lot of things, certainly over the Brexit negotiations, but over other matters of policy as well. It will affect all the social welfare legislation which the Conservatives announced that they wanted. It will affect a great many things, I think.
All this, and in just 9 days' time, the government must present a Queen's speech to Parliament, and Brexit negotiations with the rest of Europe are scheduled to start. Theresa May's weakness in her party and in Parliament make these daunting jobs even more difficult.
David Grossman. Well, Greg Barker, was a minister under David Cameron, joins me now. Greg, can she survive this?
Well, that really remains to be seen. It will be the mood of the parliamentary party and the Commons when they come together that will really judge that. But I detect that there is certainly no appetite in the party for an immediate leadership contest. So I think we'll have to see what the Commons has to say when they meet.
But how does she stay in place when there is so much anger? We saw Conservative Homes, 2/3 of MPs now saying that she should go. There is no trust left, is there?
Well, I think there's clearly not going to be another election with Theresa May at the head. We've discovered that she's a competent minister, potentially a tough negotiator, but a terrible campaigner. And so I think the parliamentary party, if this potential agreement with the DUP sticks and anticipates that there won't be a general election for several years, potentially 5 years, that does give Theresa May some time, and some time for the parliamentary party and the wider party to work out what they actually want to replace her.
You're in the Lords, you're not an MP. There'll be many who were very, very worried about their seats or indeed lost them. Yeah. In your opinion, should she go now for what she's done?
Well, I think, as I said, there's no way that we'll want her to lead us into another election. The question of timing now is critical. This is unlike David Cameron's position after the Brexit vote, because we are right on the edge of some really serious negotiations. And I think we also learned from David Cameron, a lot of people wish that he hadn't have gone so quickly. I'm certainly one of them. So I don't think the Tory party will rush into making a mistake of pushing out the leader before they know what comes next.
Negotiations will be on track as they were. Do you believe that to be the case then?
Well, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? If the leader isn't in place, then clearly the Brexit negotiations will be pushed back. But if Theresa May can command the confidence of the party in the Commons, then I think it will be on track. But I think she has
to be on track, would you?
Or
do you see this as
But what we need to know is what is that Brexit negotiation aiming to achieve? And I very much agree with what Ed Vaizey was saying in your piece there, that we need to think again about what the Brexit we're going to be pushing for looks like. And certainly I think hard Brexit has had its day, and we need a much greater consensus, not just within the party, but I think Theresa May needs to play a national role and try and forge a greater consensus across the House of Commons on what Brexit should look like. I think that's the role. If she could actually transcend party, as strange as that seems, and actually try and bring people together.
I mean, if you're right and hard Brexit has had its day, then presumably she would not be the right person to see it through. Are there not other people that you can see taking on the helm who perhaps understand this new mood of the country better than she clearly did?
I think in the longer term that's right. The question is
and who
not
would
if, but when.
Who?
Well, I think we need someone that can clearly campaign, that is articulate, that is more animated than Theresa May, but also has the values that are going to capture the imagination of younger voters as well as our traditional base. That's quite a tall order. The only person that I can see who might fit that bill would be Amber Rudd, but she's only been in the cabinet a couple of years.
So you would rule out presumably the Borises, David Davis, the people who seem to align along the hard Brexit line?
I mean, what we do know in terms of winning elections is that you've got to be able to go to the electorate with more than one message. The idea that you can have a single issue election whenever it comes is for the birds. So in electing a Tory leader, we've got to have someone that can speak to the whole Conservative agenda, and that agenda needs a massive reboot. We need to look to the success of Ruth Davidson in Scotland and embrace her sort of positive, outward-looking, optimistic style of politics here in the UK.
I'm just hearing from Nick Watt that the DUP may align itself with the Conservative Party in a confidence and supply arrangement. Would that suit you?
I think that would be ideal.
So you would not mind, I mean, there will be many people, many of Conservative voters and wider voters who say the DUP represents everything that Theresa May meant when she talked about a nasty party.
Well, they are certainly not our allies of choice. Personally, I would much prefer to do a deal with the Lib Dems. We actually had a strong and stable coalition for 5 years with the Lib Dems, but that's not on the cards. So I think what's the alternative? The alternative would be handing the keys to Jeremy Corbyn.
We're looking at a party that's homophobic, that doesn't really believe in climate change, that talks about creationism.
Sure, and I appall all of those things.
I mean, that could drag the party backwards, couldn't it? Away from the young.
They're not going to get their hand. It's just confidence supply, which basically means that they just back us on the big votes when it counts. They're not going to get their hands on policy
like the anti-austerity votes.
Well, on the budget and on the Queen's speech. So they're not going to get their hands on the levers of power in any meaningful way. But the alternative is to let Jeremy Corbyn in and his allies in Hamas and the provisional IRA. The idea that you could have somebody who calls Hamas their friends,
sure.
and their agenda for LGBT rights is truly horrific. So I would rather
nobody's talking about an allegiance
hold
to
my nose.
Thank you very much
and
indeed.
go into coalition with the DUP.
Now, the best seats of the House in this extraordinary election may yet have been those in Europe. Our friends on the continent watched once as the country tried to tear itself apart over a Brexit referendum, only to go back to the ballot box and tell the leader who promised them a strong and stable Brexit deal they didn't really want one. Will they be laughing? Will they be as confused as we are? Certainly, it may be the best deterrent Angela Merkel could ever imagine to more countries demanding their own exit from the EU. Mark Urban has been speaking to one of Angela Merkel's ministers, Peter Altmaier, in Germany. He began by asking him whether Brexit negotiations will still begin a week on Monday.
It depends on the UK's decision, of course, largely when we will start. What we know so far is that the UK has triggered Article 50, and that means a delay of 2 years will be available to negotiate, transitional periods to negotiate citizen rights. And we hope that all this can be done in due time, but we have never interfered with domestic political debates in the UK. We have allowed for sufficient time to decide when to trigger Article 50. We have allowed for a reshuffle last year in August, and certainly we have understood that the UK is in a situation where some things have to be considered, and therefore we will respect widely and as good as we can the decisions of the British government.
What would happen if the UK tried to change its mind about the whole thing, tried to withdraw the Article 50 declaration?
My God, this is a trap. This is a trap, and I've avoided the types of traps now for almost 1 year, because the question whether Article 50 application has to be changed or not, this is something to be decided in the UK. We are not interfering with that. Theresa May has explained Brexit means Brexit. This is up to date the official position of the British government, and this is understood and accepted by Europe.
To what extent do you think attitudes across Europe are now changing?
Over the last 2 months, we have seen a considerable shift in public opinion. We have seen it in France. We have seen it in Germany, where Angela Merkel has the support of a growing number of citizens and is leading the polls. We have seen it in the UK, and nobody knows the result of this. Younger people are more interested in politics than ever over the last 20 years. We have a more vivid political debate, and it's of course awfully difficult, but it presents also a chance. It presents a chance for reflection about the challenges of a worldwide scale, and this is something we want to do together with the United Kingdom, either inside or outside the European Union.
Peter Altmaier talking to Mark Urban. Well, to discuss this extraordinary few days, we're joined now by the former UKIP leader Nigel Farage, the Canaries editor-in-chief Kerry-Ann Mendoza, and the historian Simon Sharma. It's lovely to have you all here. Nigel, I'm going to start with you. You brought your party and you brought this country to a place where Brexit became possible. Do you still believe that that Brexit that you envisioned will go ahead?
Well, Brexit will go ahead. I'm pretty certain of that. I mean, after all, 85% of people voted for pro-Brexit parties. One of the reasons Corbyn managed to hoover up those UKIP votes, he made it clear in the manifesto that Labour supports Brexit. Having said that, do I think now, today, that we're going to get the kind of Brexit that most of the voters thought they were going to get? I think that's imperilled. And I suspect what we're going to see is a government that will struggle to get things through the Commons, and I think we're probably headed towards a Norway-type situation 2.5 years down the road. And that would be okay with you? Well, look, Norway is better than where we are now, but it's certainly not where I want to finish up.
Is it enough to get you back into UKIP in a meaningful way?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure of the answer to that right at this moment in time.
But you're considering taking on the position. I mean, Paul Nuttall said he'd happily swap your LBC radio show for the leadership, and he's gone now, so I guess there's a vacancy.
Well, can I just say I'm thinking about it? I mean, look, it's not top of my bucket list. For me, getting the referendum, forcing the referendum and helping to win it, I thought I was done with it. I'm going to watch very carefully, but I do think now we will see backsliding.
Kerry-Ann Mendoza, did you hear 85% backing for Brexit? I mean, that was Nigel Farage's point, that, you know, Labour was backing Brexit and the Conservatives were backing Brexit in that vote. Is that how you read the vote on Thursday night?
No. I think Theresa May and people like Nigel Farage worked very hard to make this election about Brexit. And actually, what this election was really about for people was hope versus fear. It was about what kind of country do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a country which is cruel, lacks compassion, let us get to a situation where nurses are dependent on food banks? Or do we want to be a compassionate country at home and abroad? And that was the message that won the day. It was a message that we would invest in each other, in our NHS, in our education system, in our children, and frankly,
so it wasn't about
in our
Brexit
future.
At all, really.
Well, Theresa May framed it about Brexit. I mean, look, let's be honest, it was a wholly unnecessary election because there was nothing in the Commons or Lords that was going to stop her pushing Brexit through.
Simon, we asked last time round, after the Brexit vote, we said there are a quantity of left-behinds, people that had been ignored and we had to take them seriously. Who do you think are the left-behinds now? When you see this vote and the way it's gone, who do you feel has been ignored?
Well, I think it's not a question of who's been ignored, but what's been ignored. And what's been ignored is the debate between hard Brexit and soft Brexit. I actually agree with Kerry that bread and butter issues, the basic civil decencies of life, became extremely important, and they were rather brilliantly pushed to the foreground by the Labour campaign. But Nigel's not quite. I must say, first of all, I must say, the headline in the Daily Mail tomorrow, actually, they're going to change the Sun Mail on Sunday to Farage OK with Norway.
No, I did not say that. I did not say that.
No,
I said Norway
Nigel,
is where I think we're going. No, I'm not okay with it. I said
okay.
it's better than where we are, but it's not what we voted for.
Okay.
Because the positive thing about Brexit was we were voting to be free to engage with the rest of the world.
Yep.
And you can't do that if you're stuck inside the customs union.
Right. If there was a customs union which presumably meant more freedom of movement for people in terms of immigration, then we're, in your terms, back where we started, are we? Or is it still a good enough reason to leave the EU?
If we finish up at the end of this process with free movement of people and without the ability to cut our own global deals, frankly, we're not that much further forward. We will have left the European Union in name only.
I to be honest, I think this is part of the reason that UKIP were wiped out at this election, actually, is this hope versus fear issue. We've had for years now Nigel Farage walking around like a kind of Poundland Pinochet, promising people that the problems that they have with, you know, the housing crisis, with the crumbling NHS, with, you know, schools literally sending begging letters to parents, you know, Nigel's party, their only answer is to scapegoat the most marginalised, vulnerable communities in this country and around the world. And actually that was fundamentally rejected.
Did the Conservative campaign fail to address that? Was it a nasty campaign?
I think they were really being too binary about this. That's to say, there are these very important issues about what I call the social decencies of life, and then there is this issue of whether Britain in terms of a sovereign state. They've come together precisely because actually the Labour Party manifesto did make a difference. Jeremy Corbyn said, the Labour Party said, the kind of Brexit to which we're hurtling is not the one which is endorsed by the Labour Party. And I'm not saying, so I'm saying that actually those who are worried about Theresa May's endless mantra, Brexit is Brexit, are exactly those who worry, what is our fate going to be? What is our social care going to be like? What is our health going to be like? What is the future for us in terms of the issues of our daily life if we simply mechanically move towards a hard Brexit?
Jeremy Corbyn did also make clear that leaving the European Union would mean the ending of freedom of movement. You know, he did say these things. People who voted Labour.
That's quite true.
You know, I mean, they weren't voting for this.
A little bit ahead, because there'll be lots of reading the room, the tea leaves of what the Labour Party really meant about Brexit in a place where they needed votes. When you look to the future now, do you think we become a soft... I mean, UKIP's share of the vote is now, what, 2%? Well, does that sound to you like a rejection of nasty Britain, or a Britain that didn't like the language of fear and intolerance?
In the last general election, 13% of the country voted for a pro-Brexit party. This time it was 85%. That is the dramatic effect that UKIP's had. And look, the day before the general election was called, 3 separate opinion polls showed that
you don't mind then UKIP carrying on as a part of the other parties?
Between 68 and 70%, between 68 and 70% of the country wanted us just to get on with Brexit. Now, as far as UKIP's concerned, if we don't get the kind of Brexit that we wanted, they'll be back in business in a very big way.
OK. Karen Mendoza, the future of Theresa May now. I mean, this has been, for the young people, a rejection of bad tabloid headlines, bad sort of anti-media. What's your take on where Theresa May lies now? Can she
Theresa May has to go. She's done. She's done politically. She has no vision for this country that has compelled anybody. You've got a Labour Party that is reinvigorated, and more importantly, a Labour movement which is reinvigorated, which is actually it's engaging the young, the old, the gay, the straight, the black, white, and brown, and all of the colours in between.
All
and we need to go that way.
That UKIP felt uncomfortable with.
I think Theresa May will go. And I think in the end, one of the key determinants in this election, and why Labour did so well, is Corbyn looked comfortable in his own skin. There was energy. Right from the moment he launched the manifesto, I said, wow.
This will be
May had none of that.
This will be presumably a seminal moment in our history, as we thought Brexit was. As a historian, Simon, where do you think this will take us?
You know, we want someone who actually does embody a sense of the national interest. It comes out of Theresa May's mouth as a robotic mantra. Yeah. You cannot possibly have someone as incompetent, spectacularly, incompetent as Theresa May has proved herself, going forward to the negotiations for Brexit. You might as well pick someone at random out of the yellow pages. They'd be better than her.
Do you think...
well, and the other problem is that she doesn't believe in it.
Yeah.
How can you go into...
She doesn't believe in anything.
That may be true.
Worrying from all areas of the spectrum that Theresa May has got to go. Mm-hmm. Doesn't this just show you how fickle the UK imagination or electorate is? You know, when she went to the polls in April, she thought she was going to come back with a massive mandate.
The British electorate, God bless it, sussed her out. On the contrary, she got found out, and her managers got found out, and politics by machine got found out.
She has essentially been the invisible PM since she came to office. She's had very little contact with the public. She's been issuing legislation through decree virtually, and when the British public got to see her face to face, they didn't like it, and they went another way, and that's an extraordinary achievement.
Time for the invisible Newsnight, I'm afraid, but thank you all very much indeed. That's all we have time for this evening. We are back on Monday at our usual time. Enjoy your weekend and have a good evening. Bye-bye.